The market doesn't beat most traders with losses. It beats them with waiting. The big move shows up right after their patience runs out. I've watched it happen 1,000 times, in my own account and on other people's screens. A name grinds sideways, looks heavy, tests nerves, and then, after one tired, perfectly human exit, the thing explodes. What felt like dead money becomes the chart everyone posts. We tell ourselves we were early, or the market was manipulated, or the news changed. But if I'm honest, the real reason I wasn't there is simpler. I quit before the move had time to become itself. That's the timing secret I learned from studying Jesse Livermore, and it has nothing to do with predicting tops or bottoms. It's about surviving the middle, the part where the tape is forming sponsorship in silence and the crowd is shedding attention like ballast. Livermore understood timing as behavior unfolding in time, not as a lucky timestamp. He looked for the line of least resistance, the path price wanted to travel, and then he allowed time to turn that tendency into a trend. He didn't try to bully a market into moving on his schedule. He made a few decisive commitments and then enforced a discipline that kept him from paying for impatience. Small tests first, ads funded by progress, exits placed where the idea dies, and a willingness to sit tight when the tape behaved, even if his nerves didn't. The money didn't come from more trades, it came from more time inside the right ones. If that sounds romantic, it isn't. The reason 90% quit just before the big move is physiological. Boredom and ambiguity register as pain. We feel a need to do something, tighten stops into noise, take quick profits to relieve tension, rotate to the next shiny setup. Meanwhile, a sponsored structure needs to prove itself across 3 theaters: a reclaim and hold at a meaningful level, a sponsored pullback that breathes at the right location, and participation from leaders that confirms we're riding a group, not a soloist. That choreography unfolds through bars and sessions, not seconds. If I insist the market deliver the entire narrative in one candle, I am timing my feelings, not the trade. So here's the frame we'll use for the rest of this film. First, I will name the clock that governs good campaigns: entry time, when proof begins; decision time, when the sequence confirms or fails; and hold time, the quiet stretch where edge compounds. Second, I'll show you why most exits happen not at disproof, but at discomfort, and how Livermore's structure, price stop and time stop, prevents hostage trades while preserving the ability to be present for the move. Third, we'll translate this into a practical rhythm: scout to confirmation sequence, paid ads, and sit tight, with a correlation cap so we don't mistake one theme for diversification. Finally, we'll step into a real campaign where the big move arrived only after the boredom did, and we'll examine how I kept my cursor from becoming a relief valve. If you've ever felt the sting of watching your former position streak without you, this is the antidote. We're not going to guess better, we're going to wait better, with rules that protect capital and, equally important, protect attention. The market's cruelty isn't that it moves against you, it's that it moves without you, after you negotiated your way out. Livermore's timing secret is to make sure your method can outlast your mood long enough for a correct idea to grow up. When you look back at missed runners, what pushed you out first? Boredom? Fear of giving back? Or a tighter stop that got nicked? Drop your answer, and I'll tailor the next section to attack that leak directly.
Rolling forward from that timing frame, the first fight I face isn't with the market. It's with the 2 clocks inside me that don't agree. One clock wants to act now because every second feels like slippage. The other wants to wait forever for a version of certainty that tape never grants. When a setup starts forming, I can feel both clocks grab the wheel. The act now side points to an early reclaim and says, if this is the big one, you'll miss it. The wait forever side whispers, let it prove everything, then decide. Both voices claim to be protecting me. In truth, each becomes dangerous the moment it operates alone. Livermore dealt with that split by assigning jobs to time. He treated entry time as a point where proof begins, not where the whole story arrives. That's why I start with a scout, tiny, bracketed, on a timer, so the act now side gets a legal outlet. Then comes decision time. If the sequence doesn't complete,
reclaim and hold, sponsored pullback at the right location, participation from leaders, I end the argument at disproof or at time. No more mental courtroom. Finally, there's hold time, the part most traders never let themselves experience, where I sit in a correct structure while the crowd gets impatient. That's the stretch where the curve bends, not because I predicted anything special, but because I let behavior keep speaking. The paradox is that each clock has a valid fear. Move too soon, and I buy apparent strength, a sprint with no footprints, and I teach my nervous system that impatience can be profitable. Wait for perfection, and I let the invitation expire. By the time the crowd validates what I saw, the asymmetry is gone. The only way through is choreography that both clocks must respect. I send the scout so I'm not paralyzed. I demand the 3-link chain so I'm not gambling. I set a time stop so a maybe can't squat on capital and attention. And I pre-write the price stop at the exact place the idea dies, beneath the level that must hold or under the last higher low defining structure, so I don't negotiate with pain when it's loudest. Where this becomes psychological is in the middle distance, when the chart drifts and my brain starts narrating to relieve discomfort. A dull pullback becomes healthy. A random uptick becomes buying interest. The index flickers green, and I rename correlation confirmation. That's not reading, that's story-making. Livermore's way out was to demote stories beneath location and sequence. If sponsorship doesn't arrive at the right spot, near the reclaimed level or a clear higher low, it isn't sponsorship. If leaders don't echo, I'm watching a soloist. If momentum doesn't show on time, the setup is stale even if price hasn't violated my line. These are not insults to intuition. They are the rails that let me keep intuition without letting it run the account. Another piece of the paradox, fear of giving back. The first +1R flickers and my protect clock wants to cash it before the market can take it. But the big move needs breathing room. It exhales, tests. Livermore's answer was to add from profits when the second and third links print, then trail under structure that defines the thesis, not under fear. If the entire paid move is surrendered, I reduce without speeches. That keeps me from strangling a trend into mediocrity while still honoring the contract that made me calm enough to hold in the first place. So, the inner conflict turns into a workable pact. Action is loud, but only as a scout. Conviction is allowed, but only after a chain the crowd can't fake. Waiting is allowed, but only inside a declared time window. Protection is allowed, but only at disproof or structure, not at the nearest comfortable tick. When I live that pact, I stop quitting in the last quiet mile before the turn because boredom and ambiguity no longer have jurisdiction over my cursor. In your own charts, which side of the timing paradox betrays you more? Jumping on apparent strength before the hold, or waiting until the crowd validates the move and the edge is gone? Tell me below, and I'll attack that side directly in the next section.
Staying with that pact from Section 2, I can see exactly where it breaks down. Not in big cinematic failures, but in the tiny edits I make to language when time gets heavy. The screen goes quiet, and I start translating discomfort into insight. A ragged reclaim becomes good enough. A pullback that lands too deep becomes healthy. A single name lifting is suddenly group rotation. None of those labels change the tape, they change me. And that's how I end up quitting in the last quiet mile before the turn or pressing at the first loud mile after it. The first trap is manufactured proof. True timing requires a chain, reclaim and hold, sponsored pullback at the right location, participation from leaders. But when I'm tired of waiting, I promote a single tick to evidence. I call a whisper above resistance a reclaim. I call a bounce 2 ATRs below the shelf sponsorship. I call a chat chorus participation. Livermore's cure is cruelly simple. If the reclaimed level doesn't hold, there is no proof. If the first pullback doesn't find sponsorship where it should, there is no proof. If leaders don't echo, there is no proof. Timing without proof is just hope on a fast internet connection. The second trap is time distortion.
Entry time is designed to begin the story, but boredom stretches the minutes until they feel like incompetence. Hostage trades get born here. They don't violate price, they violate tempo. The idea promised to show character inside a declared window, and it didn't. Livermore paired every price stop with a time stop because cognition is a position too. If I let a maybe squat on my attention, I'll miss the sponsored move that arrives while I'm babysitting the wrong narrative. Third is identity rescue. 2 quick scratches and a part of me wants to win back my tone. That's the moment I shrink the confirmation bar, nudge a stop, or just add a little so the next uptick feels like redemption. But the method says ads must be paid by progress and fresh proof, which makes averaging down logically impossible. If conviction must trail proof, pressing into disproof isn't courage, it's contradiction. Livermore didn't scale because he felt right. He scaled because the market funded the next unit. Fourth is the narrative stop. I inch the exit to where it hurts less rather than where the idea dies. The thesis dies at lost structure, last higher low broken, failed reclaims, new support refuses its job, or time expiry. Anywhere else is anesthesia. Every narrative inch surrendered at the stop is an inch I will pay for in the hold, because a fuzzy exit guarantees a fragile grip when the move actually comes alive. Fifth is overtight profit protection. Fear of giving back pushes me to trail beneath noise, not beneath structure. I convert a campaign into a scalp disguised as prudence and then blame the market for running without me. Livermore's answer was rhythmic. Scale some at the first measured extension, then re-anchor the stop under the structure that defines the thesis, not under my nerves. If the entire paid move is surrendered, I reduce without speeches. Otherwise, I let hold time do the compounding the entry earned. Sixth is correlation blindness. 4 symbols rhyme and I feel diversified. In reality, I'm holding one factor wearing different logos. When the wave hits, they kneel together and my prudence becomes a lever I didn't know I pulled. Counting risk by theme, character, and trimming the basket as one decision when the index shoves keeps me from mistaking weather for stock picking. Seventh is method drift. 3 clean reds in a ruthless tape, and I start auditioning indicators mid-flight. Sometimes regimes do really change. More often, variance wears a scary mask. The fix is a fixed trial count. Evaluate after 20 to 30 fully qualified trades in the same regime, not after 3 punches. Timing improves when cadence is stable. Eighth is social proof timing. I hesitate when my read is early. I feel safe when the crowd arrives, precisely when the edge has been spent. The sequence must hire conviction, not the timeline of likes. If I need the timeline to breathe for me, I am already late. Ninth is P&L anchoring. As soon as my day number appears, I protect it even if the structure deserves patience. As soon as I fall short, I press exactly when the ocean turned ruthless. Livermore's counter was to score process beside P&L, so green luck couldn't launder a bad day and clean red could still count as progress. When I line these traps up, manufactured proof, time distortion, identity rescue, narrative stops, over-tight trails, correlation blindness, method drift, social timing, P&L anchoring, I'm really staring at one engine, the need for relief impersonating truth. The only antidote I've found is to demote relief beneath sequence, location, time, and structure, the 4 corners that don't care how I feel. That's what pulls me through the last dull stretch before the break and keeps me present when the move finally pays for my patience. From here, it helps to put my modern terms aside and borrow Livermore's eyes directly. How he read sponsorship forming in silence, how he let time do compounding without surrendering control, and how his exits acted like contracts rather than suggestions. That lens is the bridge from psychology to procedure. Which trap steals your best setups the most? Time distortion, narrative stops, or overtight profit protection? Tell me your pick and I'll lean hard into Livermore's answer to it in the next section. Carrying the traps I named in Section 3 into a clearer lens, the most valuable shift came when I began asking, how would Jesse Livermore read this in time? He didn't search for a magic bar pattern. He watched for order asserting itself where disorder had been. Strength, to him, wasn't a shout. It was a kept promise around a meaningful point, performed on schedule and joined by others with the same intent. If I translate his language into mine, his timing edge lived at the intersection of 4 ideas: line of least resistance, sponsorship in sequence, contracts with reality, and the right to sit tight. Start with the line of least resistance. Livermore wanted to know where price wanted to travel when it wasn't forced by headlines or retail panic. That line doesn't reveal itself in a single spike. It reveals itself when an old ceiling is reclaimed and then held while dips behave where they should. He learned to ignore the first bragging tick and to demand behavior at location. The shelf just above the reclaim, the last higher low, the pivot that should now act as hinge. When the pullback breathes at the right spot, he reads it as sponsorship, not coincidence. When it breathes at the wrong spot, he reads it as relief, not strength. Next comes sponsorship in sequence. He'd never promote a single candle to proof. He waited for the chain the crowd can't fake for long. Reclaim and hold, sponsored pullback at location, push with participation. Participation meant the chorus sang. Leaders in the group echoed the move. The sector breathed with it. The broader tape didn't contradict it. One stock can impersonate vigor for a few minutes. A campaign requires accomplices. That is why most traders quit just before the move. They are measuring a solo act and timing their feelings, while a slower, real alignment is forming one link at a time. Then contracts with reality. Livermore exited where the idea died, not where his fear quieted. The price stop lived under the reclaimed level that must now act as support, beneath the last higher low that narrates structure, or below the pivot the thesis depends on. Equally important, he ran a time stop. A momentum idea owes character inside a declared window. If the clock expires without behavior, the idea is stale even if price hasn't violated the line. This is the antidote to hostage trades and to the "I'll just give it a little more room" self-talk that empties the account by inches. Contracts, price and time, are how he preserved attention, the fuel required to still be present when the move finally arrives. His entry and size logic protected timing from ego. He would test with a small probe, our scout, a paid observation, not a personality statement. If the sequence printed, he added from profits. Unit number 2 only when the prior unit's unrealized funded the extra risk and fresh proof appeared. Unit number 3 only when a second independent proof arrived. Range shift, leadership broadening, breadth confirmation. That policy makes averaging down logically impossible. If conviction must trail proof, pressing into disproof is contradiction, not courage. Importantly, he accepted the quiet middle, what we're calling hold time, as where the money actually happens. The probe bought the seat, the ads built the stake, the sitting paid the bill. On correlation, he was early by decades. He knew 5 tickers could be one bet in different jackets. He therefore counted exposure by character, theme, beta, tape tone, and reduced the basket as a single decision when the index shoved. Waves, not raindrops, sink boats. This kept a sponsored name from getting framed for a macro crime and kept him solvent long enough to let a good campaign mature. Finally, cash as inventory. Flat wasn't failure, it was the resource that bought the next early seat. When the sequence stalled on time, he ended the story and kept optionality. When it reappeared, he had both attention and capital to say yes. That posture is why his famous line, "It never was my thinking that made the big money for me, it always was my sitting," is so often misunderstood. Sitting wasn't passivity, it was earned stillness inside a position that had fulfilled its contracts. When I map his lens onto our timing problem, why 90% quit just before the move, the diagnosis is simple. Most traders lack a sequence to keep them in, a clock to keep them out, and contracts to stop the negotiations. Livermore's timing secret isn't mystical. Let the market hire you through behavior, add only when it pays you, and sit tight while the campaign does its work. The exit is pre-written, the basket respects the tide, and cash waits with dignity until the next proof arrives.
If you adopted only one of these Livermore elements tomorrow, time stops, paid ad pyramids, basket trims on waves, or cash as inventory, which would most improve your timing through the quiet middle? Tell me below and I'll wire that piece tighter in the live example next.
Taking Livermore's lens from Section 4 straight into the tape, I built a campaign in a name I'll call Northbridge Labs, a liquid tech infrastructure stock that had been rejected twice at the same weekly pivot. Its cohort, the middleware group, was beginning to hum after a month of rotation, but the index felt indecisive and factor coupling wasn't benign. Before I let any single chart seduce me, I tagged the ocean. Breadth modest, realized ATR above its 20-day, leadership narrowing, coupling medium-high. That made the regime neutral, leaning ruthless. The tag cut my permissions automatically. Attempts capped at 4, base risk trimmed, confirmation bar raised 1 notch. No hero trades. I'd need the sequence to print in order. I drew the level that mattered. Last week's failure pivot, now potential resistance turned support if reclaimed. I wrote it on the blotter with a volatility cushion, so a whisper through the line couldn't impersonate proof. Beneath it, the structure pivot. The last higher low on the 30-minute was my definition of where the story dies. For location, I circled the shelf just above the level. If the first pullback after reclaim breathed there, I'd read it as sponsorship. Anything deeper would demote the move from sponsored to lucky. For leadership, I pinned 2 peers and the sector ETF so participation could be observed, not imagined. The open tried to recruit my impatience. Northbridge popped right into the level and stalled. I did nothing. 10 minutes later, it probed again, printed a small excess, and pulled back. Still nothing. On the third approach, something changed. We reclaimed and held for a full 5-minute bar and then a second. Bids stepped up at the line rather than beneath it. That satisfied the first verb in the chain, so I sent to Scout, tiny, bracketed, and on a timer set to 75 minutes. Its job wasn't income. It was to ask the market a yes-no question. Will you keep your promise? The first pullback landed almost exactly where the story said it should, on the shelf, just above the reclaimed line. Spread stayed tight, sellers looked tired. Time and Q suggested real sponsorship instead of a one-print miracle. On the next lift, I watched the chorus widget. One peer marched with Northbridge, the other hesitated. The sector ETF blinked green, but not strong. I waited 2 more minutes for participation to stop being a rumor. When the second peer finally joined and volume thickened across the group, unit number 2 unlocked, funded by the Scout's unrealized gain, not by my appetite. Progress literally paid for aggression. Midday, the hardest hour, arrived with silence. The timer kept me honest. 15 minutes passed with nothing but small bars and a tug-of-war around VWAP. Old me would narrate, it's coiling, they're absorbing. The method said, it's stalling until it isn't, read the clock. At minute 58, a higher low formed exactly where the thesis lived, and then a range shift pushed us above the morning's intraday high. My rules required a second independent proof to unlock unit number 3. The range shift plus a breadth uptick in the sector ETF qualified. I added, scaled a third into the first measured extension, and raised the stop beneath the intraday structure that now defined the campaign. I wrote 1 line to chain my future self. If the entire paid move is surrendered, reduce without speeches. Late afternoon brought the wave. The index shove wasn't dramatic, but coupling tightened across tech. My blotter groups by character, not ticker, so I saw 5 small positions singing the same song. Even though Northbridge still looked composed, I trimmed the basket exposure as one decision, lead and cousins together, because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. That trim bought me the right to let Northbridge keep talking. It dipped, kissed the trail, and held. Into the close, structure remained intact, participation didn't vanish, and my process score stayed green. So I carried a small runner with the stop tucked under the most recent swing. The next morning opened with a faint lower that tagged the stop by a hair and then launched. One of those malicious little shakes that train people to give room where the idea doesn't deserve it. I was flat, slightly annoyed, and grateful the script had made the choice for me. 10 minutes later, the tape offered the re-entry I'm usually too stubborn to take. Another reclaim and hold at a higher level with the same choir singing louder. I repeated the choreography, scout, timer, sponsored pullback at the new shelf, participation across peers, and then paid ads as progress funded them. This time the move didn't stall. Northbridge walked up the staircase for 2 sessions while my job was to sit tight under structure, not strangling the trade with a stop placed under nerves. When the advance finally surrendered the entire paid move, I reduced without speeches and let the remainder trail until the thesis broke. Looking back at the journal matters more than the dollars. I didn't predict the big leg. I refused to quit during the quiet mile where sponsorship forms. Reclaim and hold wasn't to guess, it was a behavior at a point of importance. Sponsorship wasn't a feeling, it was location-correct buying. Participation wasn't Twitter, it was leaders echoing. Ads weren't bravado, they were paid. Exits weren't arguments, they were contracts. Price at disproof, time at expiration, basket trimmed on the wave. That is what Livermore meant by timing. Let the tape hire you, then give it enough time to pay you. Comment your toughest moment in that sequence, resisting the anxious narrative during silence, honoring the time stop, or taking the reentry without pride, so I can press on that hinge as we move into the emotional low point next.
Carrying the Northbridge campaign forward, the tape did what good tapes eventually do. It stopped flattering me. After 2 sessions of orderly stares, the range narrowed into a grinding drift that tugged at my nerves like a loose thread. I could feel the residue of recent success loosening my guard. I opened the platform earlier than I promised myself I would, skimmed the pre-open card as if yesterday's discipline could be grandfathered into today, and let the whisper in my head upgrade the ocean from neutral-leaning ruthless back to neutral because I wanted room to work. That was the first slip. Not a rule break, a mood promotion. The morning delivered a false start. Northbridge printed a tidy reclaim 1 tier higher, enough to invite a scout. I placed it by the book, bracketed, timer set, stop where the idea dies, and then watched the pullback sink a shade deeper than the shelf I had circled. I tried to narrate the depth as healthy. The clock did its job. Participation never arrived, and the position closed on time. Tuition, nothing more. But the second attempt exposed the real problem. I wasn't asking the market to sponsor me, I was asking it to restore the rhythm I liked. On try 2, the reclaim looked cleaner, and I felt the temptation to front-run the second link in the chain. I added a little ahead of sponsorship because it was about to show, which is just a sophisticated way to say I didn't want to wait for proof. When the pullback breathed a tick too deep, exactly where my setup card said the logic bends, I stared at the stop like it had betrayed me. The timer kept walking towards 0. That's when the most expensive sentence in my vocabulary formed. Give it a little room. I didn't move the stop on the ticket, but I moved it in imagination, which is how disobedience rehearses. I could feel the campaign tilting from method to identity work. I closed it on schedule and left the desk for 10 minutes like I promised the calm version of me I would. Shoes, water, air. When I came back, I opened the journal and did the 2-column audit that saves me more than any indicator. What the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof. Proved. Reclaim held briefly, but sponsorship did not arrive at location. Leadership was mixed. Sector breadth was thin. Factor coupling had tightened since the open. Assumed. The bid was about to show. The dip was a shakeout. Leadership would catch up. I had fallen back into timing my feelings. Worse, I was using the prior campaign success as a permission slip to cheapen the chain. The turning point wasn't an inspirational speech, it was enforcement. I retagged the regime ruthless for the next 90 minutes, which automatically raised the confirmation bar and cut my attempt budget. I locked the time stop automation so no position could apply for hostage status. I restored the paid ad gate that I had mentally loosened. No size unless the market funds it and fresh proof appears. I tightened the basket alert so any renewed wave in tech would force me to reduce exposure as one decision. And I put the sentence that had just tried to hire me, give it a little room, at the top of the screen with a red slash through it. If I needed extra room, it meant the idea didn't deserve me. The afternoon gave me the kind of test that ruins a lot of weeks. Northbridge reclaimed again and printed a picture-perfect first pullback. Almost.
The location was a hair low, just enough to let me argue with my card if I wanted to be clever. Leadership was better, breadth improving, the sector ETF finally participating. I took the scout and started the clock. This time I didn't anticipate the ad. I waited. 2 bars later, sponsorship did arrive right where it should, and the chorus sang in unison. Unit number 2 unlocked, paid by the scouts unrealized. I could feel the relief valve in my chest begging for a preemptive trim. Instead, I scaled only into the first measured extension and re-anchored the stop beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. Into the last hour, the index shoved lower. Old me would have pleaded with Northbridge to be the exception. The basket rule reminded me that waves, not raindrops, sink boats. I trimmed exposure across the theme in one decision. Northbridge dipped, kissed the trail, and held. I ended the day modestly green in P&L and strongly green in process, which mattered more. The big move hadn't arrived yet, but the operator who might be paid by it tomorrow was still intact. What changed at this low point wasn't the chart, it was my jurisdiction. The clock ended arguments, the sequence refused promotion. The paid ad policy turned boldness into policy and outlawed identity rescue. The basket discipline protected me from mistaking weather for stock picking. And the 10-minute walk protected the only instrument I truly trade with, my attention. That's Livermore's timing secret in practice. Let the method outlast your mood long enough for sponsorship to finish forming in silence. When your discipline wobbles in the quiet middle, what saves you fastest? A hard time stop? Visible regime tag? Paid ad gate or basket trim alert? Tell me your pick, and I'll wire it tighter as we move into the rule that makes the next leg possible. Coming straight out of that wobble and the enforcement that steadied me, the lesson that actually turns timing into something I can repeat is Livermore's plainest sentence rebuilt as an operating system. Proof before conviction. Not a slogan, not inspiration, an order of work that runs even when my nerves want to edit it. If sections 5 and 6 were about surviving the quiet middle without negotiating, this is the spine that lets me do it on purpose. I start by giving time a job that the chart can't counterfeit. Every campaign lives on 3 clocks: entry time, decision time, and hold time. Entry time is not where the whole story arrives, it's where proof begins. That is why my first order is always a scout, small, bracketed, on a timer. Its job is to ask a no question. Can you reclaim and hold a meaningful level? Decision time is where the chain must complete or the argument ends. After the hold, the first pullback needs sponsorship at the correct location, on or just above the reclaimed level, or at the last higher low, and the next push must carry participation from leaders across the group. If any NINC is missing on time, I exit at disproof or at the time window. No speeches. Hold time is the dividend period, the quiet stretch where I sit beneath structure while the campaign pays me for enduring uncertainty without trying to improve the rules. From those clocks, the rule unfolds as choreography. 1. Conditions gate ambition. Before the bell, I tag the ocean forgiving, neutral, or ruthless. That single adjective sets attempt count, base risk, and the height of the confirmation bar. No single attractive chart can overrule an ugly sea. This is how I prevent boredom from masquerading as opportunity when the tape is not hiring. 2. Confirmation is a chain, not a tick. Reclaim and hold, to sponsored pullback at location, to participation, leader's echo. I make the verbs non-negotiable. A whisper through resistance is not a reclaim. A deep, random bounce is not sponsorship. A solo act is not participation. The crowd can fake a candle, it struggles to fake a chain in order and on schedule. 3. Conviction must be funded. I add from profits only. Unit number 2 unlocks when 2 things are true at once. The scout's unrealized pays the incremental risk and fresh proof appears, range shift, or a clean retest and go. Unit number 3 requires an independent proof, leadership broadening, sector breadth confirming, or a second range shift. This single rule converts boldness into policy and makes averaging down logically impossible. If conviction must trail proof, pressing into disproof is contradiction, not courage. 4. Exits are contracts with reality. The price stop lives where the idea dies. beneath the reclaimed level that must now act as support, below the last higher low that defines the thesis, or under the pivot the campaign depends on. The time stop protects cognition. Momentum owes character inside a declared window. If the clock expires without behavior, the idea is stale, even if the profit and loss is only mildly red or even slightly green. The market doesn't owe me clarity after I decide to wait. I owe myself a boundary so attention stays solvent. 5. Waves beat raindrops. Manage the basket. I count exposure by character, theme or factor, not by symbol. Total open factor risk is capped, for me, less than or equal to 3R. When the index shoves or coupling tightens, I trim the basket as one decision, even if my prettiest chart still behaves, because the tide, not my taste, decides whether I get to keep size through the next hour. 6. Process and the operator come first. A broker-enforced -2R day fuse refuses new orders when my brand is likelier to seek redemption than information. Post-close, I score process beside P&L. Sequences honored, time stops obeyed, ads paid, factor caps respected, so luck can't launder sloppiness and clean reds remain progress. What this rule buys me is the right to sit tight without superstition. I'm no longer hoping time will bless me. I'm keeping time with a metronome the crowd can't hear. The scout buys the seat, the tape funds the stake, and the contracts end the debate. When sponsorship pauses, I pause. When it resumes, I already have the orientation to press on schedule, not on adrenaline. This is exactly why most traders quit 1 bar before the turn. They measure comfort, not behavior. They have no contract with time. They scale belief, not proof. Livermore's climbing secret is simpler and harder. Let the market hire you, then let time work while you protect the operator who must hold the seat. If you could hardwire only one element tomorrow, the time stop window, paid ad unlocks, or basket caps, which would erase the most mistakes on your desk? Carrying proof before conviction out of Section 7 and into a modern terminal means I stop relying on courage and start relying on defaults that express the rule for me. I want my tools to make the right thing easy and the wrong thing expensive. Before the bell, I open a small dashboard that converts the ocean into permissions. Index breadth versus 20-day, realized ATR versus 20-day, leadership persistence, how many leaders are still leaders, and a quick factor coupling score. One click writes forgiving/neutral/ruthless at the top of every chart and pushes that tag into my broker presets. Attempts 5, 4, 3. Base risk 1.0R, 0.75R, 0.5R, and confirmation height +0, +1, +2. If I hesitate, I default to ruthless. That single adjective keeps one gorgeous chart from overruling an ugly sea. A very Livermore posture. Orders are built to make test, pay, protect unavoidable. Every first entry is a bracketed scout, OCO. The stop sits at disproof, where the idea dies, not where it hurts less. The profit leg is sized to finance unit number 2 if the next link prints, and a timer runs the time stop. When the window closes without behavior, the platform flattens me. No dialog box, no "are you sure?" no negotiation. Hostage trades don't just burn P&L, they burn attention. Livermore would have called this guarding the operator. To make participation visible, I pin a tiny chorus tile beside price. Percent of group above their reclaim, volume share on leaders versus laggards, and sector ETF breadth. A soloist can impress me. A choir convinces me. If the tile is thin, my read is thin. When the tile thickens with green, readiness becomes obvious, and I don't need to invent conviction. Paid ads get enforced in the platform. Unit number 2 remains locked until 2 conditions are simultaneously true. The scout's unrealized pays the incremental risk, and fresh proof appears. Range shift or retest-and-go with visible sponsorship. Unit number 3 requires an independent proof, leadership broadening, sector breadth expanding, or a second range shift. If proof pauses, scaling pauses. This is where Livermore's "let profits take care of themselves" meets modern risk. I'm not brave, I'm budgeted by progress. For basket risk, I group positions by character, theme, beta, and factor, so 5 rhyming tickers can't impersonate diversification. Total open factor risk is capped, less than or equal to 3R for me. When the index shoves or coupling tightens, a rule triggers a basket trim as a single decision. Even if my prettiest name still behaves, I reduce across the theme because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. That one automation prevents a sponsored idea from getting framed for a macro crime. I split the session into roles so drift has fewer doors. Analyst, pre-open, tag regime, build setup cards, entry behavior, disproof, time window, add criteria, in writing, not memory. Operator, live, execute only what's on the card, no edits in trade. Auditor, post-close, 2 columns, what the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof, plus a process score beside P&L. After 30 fully qualified trades in a similar regime, I review parameters. Variance alone is not permission to tweak. That's how I keep boredom from masquerading as innovation. Readiness is measured like risk. If sleep, mood, or focus score low, I pre-announce a watch-only first hour. Cash becomes inventory, attention and optionality, rather than a verdict about my identity. Livermore's sit tight was never passive. It was earned stillness, contracts at price and time, size funded by progress, and a rider willing to let the horse run because the saddle was fitted beforehand. Finally, I hardwire re-entry dignity. The moment a campaign stops me out correctly and then reprints the chain 1 tier higher, the desk surfaces a fresh card so pride doesn't cost me the second invitation. Same scout, same timer, same paid ad logic. I don't chase, I re-engage on the behavior I asked for in the first place. This single habit has recovered more missed runners than any new indicator I ever tried. Everything here is just Section 7 in buttons. Reclaim and hold, to sponsored pullback, to participation, to scout, to paid ads, to exits at price and time, to basket control. The crowd can fake a candle, it cannot fake a chain on schedule. My job is to let the system carry that burden, so my attention is free for the one thing that still requires me, sitting tight when the tape behaves, and stepping away when it withholds. Which installation would upgrade your desk tomorrow? Regime presets? Auto time stop flatten? Paid ad gate? Or basket cap trim? Tell me your pick, and I'll fold it into the step-by-step checklist next.
Carrying the installs from Section 8 straight into muscle memory, I run the same choreography every session, so timing isn't a feeling. It's a sequence that makes the right action the path of least resistance. I write it like a flight card I can obey on a bad day without creativity. Pre-open, 10 minutes. Tag and preset. I open the small dashboard, breadth versus 20-day, realized ATR versus 20-day, leadership persistence, factor coupling. One click writes forgiving, neutral, ruthless across the platform and pushes permissions to my broker. Attempts, 543. Base risk, 1.0R, 0.75R, 0.5R. Confirmation height, +0, +1, +2. If I hesitate, I default to ruthless. That adjective is my first timing decision. It prevents one beautiful chart from overruling an ugly sea. Build the watch list by behavior. 2 columns only. Level, names with a clear reclaim or pivot, and leadership, names already printing relative strength. If a name appears in both, I star it. I pin 2 peers and the sector ETF beside each starred name so participation is observable, not imagined. Write setup cards, not from memory. For every candidate, I fill 4 blanks. 1. Entry behavior. Reclaim and hold of specific level. 2. Disproof. Exact price where the idea dies, beneath the reclaimed level plus cushion or below the last higher low. 3. Time window. How long momentum owes me character. 4. Add criteria. Fresh proof only. Range shift, retest and go with sponsorship, leadership echo. If any blank can't be filled, the name moves to observation. Opening protocol. First 90 minutes. I let the reclaim happen and hold. My first order is a bracketed scout, OCO. Stop at disproof, profit leg sized to finance unit number 2, and a timer equal to the card's window. I narrate the chain out loud. Hold, sponsored pullback, participation, so language can't quietly downgrade the verbs. If any link is missing on time, I exit by contract, price, or clock. Scaling only when paid. Unit number 2 unlocks only if 2 conditions are true together. The scout's unrealized pays the incremental risk, and fresh proof appears. Unit number 3 requires an independent proof. Leadership broadens, sector breadth expands, or a second range shift. If proof pauses, scaling pauses. No reputation ads, no ads. Conviction trails proof, not mood. Make participation visible. A small chorus tile sits next to price. Percent of group above their reclaim. Volume share on leaders. Sector ETF breadth. Thin tile equals thin conviction. If the tile swells with green, I know the campaign has air cover without inventing a story. Troll while in the move. I trail beneath structure that defines the thesis, not beneath fear. If the position gives back the entire paid move, I reduce without speeches. I map open risk by character, theme, beta, sector, and cap total factor risk less than 3R. When the index shoves or coupling tightens, I trim the basket as one decision, even if my prettiest name still behaves, because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. Midday discipline. Silence invites narrative. The timer ends hostage trades. If 4 scans produce no qualified sequences, I schedule a watch-only block to recharge attention. Cash is inventory, optionality and focus, not a verdict on identity. Re-entry dignity. If I'm stopped correctly and the chain reprints 1 tier higher, the platform surfaces a fresh card. Same scout, same timer, same paid ad logic. I don't chase, I re-engage on behavior I demanded in the first place. Last hour. If a runner survives, I migrate the stop beneath the most recent swing that defines the thesis, not the closest tick that soothes nerves. I only hold overnight if structure supports it and coupling is benign. I write 1 sentence for any hold. What must remain true by morning. If the sentence needs adjectives, I flatten. Post-close audit. 10 minutes. 2 columns. What the tape proved versus what I assumed without proof. I score process 0 to 5 beside P&L and tag any violations. Ignored timer, narrative stop, factor breach. Parameters are reviewed only after 30 fully qualified trades in a similar regime. Variance alone isn't permission to tweak. Operator recovery. Any rule break or a -2R day triggers half size for 10 clean executions. Screens off. Walk. Water. Journal. I return only when I can run the card verbatim. Calm isn't a mood. It's the sound this system makes when it's obeyed. Nothing here predicts the big move. It preserves me through the quiet middle, so I'm still in the chair when sponsorship finishes forming. The crowd can fake a candle. It cannot fake reclaim and hold, sponsored pullback, and participation on schedule. My job is to let the scout buy the seat, let progress fund the stake, and let contracts end debates until time does what timing requires.
Carrying the step-by-step card from Section 9 into the closing minutes, I notice the room is still loud, but my posture isn't. The screen keeps offering tiny temptations, 1-tick highs dressed up as destiny, shallow dips that dare me to rename them sponsorship, chat windows that award confidence on layaway. None of that changes the order I've practiced all day. Reclaim and hold, sponsored pullback at location, participation across leaders, scout, pay ads, exits at price and time, basket control. I'm not trying to be early or perfect anymore. I'm trying to be on time. On time is what remains when proof, not mood, sets the clock. This is where Livermore's timing secret finally becomes livable instead of admirable. He didn't beat crowds with clairvoyance. He outlasted their attention with contracts. He wrote the terms the market had to meet before he worked for it. He let time turn tendency into trend, and he refused to let discomfort impersonate disproof. When I run his logic on a modern desk, the romance drains away and the reliability shows through. The scout buys the seat at the moment entry time begins. The chain completes or decision time ends the debate. The hold lives under structure while the campaign breathes during hold time, and when a wave hits, I reduce the basket without needing my favorite chart's permission, because waves, not raindrops, sink boats. I used to believe the big move skipped me because I picked poorly. Most of the time it skipped me because I quit a few bars before sponsorship finished forming. My stop wasn't where the idea died, it was where my nerves wanted a receipt. My ads weren't paid, they were confessions of hope. My process didn't have a clock, it had an alibi. The last miles before a turn always feel empty. No chorus yet, no reward yet, only the sense that I could be doing something more active. But the compounding I admire in other traders wasn't earned by action, it was earned by order, the kind calm enough to endure silence and strict enough to end it when the window closes. There's a checklist I hear in my head as the bell approaches. Did I let the ocean tag gate ambition, or did I promote a mood to forecast? Did I demand the hold and the location correct sponsorship, or did I let distance rewrite the story? Did I verify participation with leaders, or did I accept a soloist because it sang my favorite tune? Did I add only when paid on fresh proof, or did I rent size from faith? Did I exit where the idea dies or when the time runs out, or did I move a line to ease a feeling? Did I trim the basket on the wave, or did I wait for my prettiest name to ask nicely? If the answer set is yes, the session did its real job whether the P&L sparkled or not. It preserved the operator who must be present for the next sponsored invitation. And then I copy a single sentence at the top of tomorrow's card while it's still true. Proof before conviction. It is not a mantra, it is a metronome. It keeps me from measuring progress by excitement and from measuring discipline by pain tolerance. It prevents almost from impersonating earned. It makes re-entry a dignity instead of a confession because the rule cares about sequence, not pride. Most importantly, it lets time do the one thing it has always done for those who survive it, separate the real from the loud. So I shut the platform with two balances solvent, capital and attention. If I am rich in both, I am professionally wealthy because tomorrow I can afford to wait again. The crowd will still try to buy the future wholesale with slogans and hurry. I will still buy it retail with behavior and clocks. Somewhere a campaign is forming in silence. It will reclaim and hold. It will breathe at the shelf. It will gather a choir, and it will pay anyone who stayed available through the boring part. I intend to be there, not because I guessed better, but because I quit quitting before the move. What single line will you tape above your charts this week to stop you from quitting in the last quiet mile? Hold or it isn't proof? Paid ads only, exit at time, or trim the basket on the wave? Tell me your line in one sentence, and I'll compress it into a screen-ready rule you can run tomorrow.